Greetings, heroes. It is I, your friendly neighborhood Rabbi, John Carrier. And I know I scheduled this for 3 o'clock, and it's a little bit after that. I apologize for that. I'll tell you why in a second. But if you're watching this on the replay, you don't care. So I won't go too long into it. But I just came in. Every Thursday, I go and visit a friend of mine. And this friend of mine, her name is June. She is 90 years old, approximately. I think it's an even 90. She just celebrated her 90th birthday. And I visit her every Thursday. It's kind of my jam. I don't have like a ton of 90-year-old friends. I don't know if a lot of people have a ton of 90-year-old friends, but I have a couple of friends in their 90s. One of the benefits of being a rabbi is you get to meet people from all sorts of different places. We've got a little bit different camera angle here, so making sure I'm still in the frame. But so every Thursday I go visit my friend June. Today it went a little bit long. Hashtag sorry, not sorry. She's a lot of fun to hang out with, and it's one of the highlights of my week. So just ran in from that. Had a lot of stuff to set up. The camera angle's a little bit different today because I have props. I don't often have props in a video. But today, because we are talking about the blessings to say for Shabbat dinner, I thought I should hook us up with some of the accoutrements, if you will. Today in this video, we will be lighting candles. We will also be practicing the blessings for, what's the first thing we do? We do Kiddush. So we will be practicing Kiddush out of a very special Kiddush cup. Looks kind of colorful. Looks like maybe a 5 or a 6-year-old picked these colors, and in fact, that's true. Actually, let's see. It was 3 years ago, so there's about a 3-year-old picked these colors, but also put her handprint on there. This is a Kiddush cup that one of my daughters made for me for birthday, I think, and so I like to use this Kiddush cup. Sometimes Kiddush cups can be fancy. Like this one is pretty fancy. This was a gift from my congregation. And we have another one. This was a gift from my oldest son. So sometimes in the mood for a goblet of mead and use this one. Sometimes I like to use the shiny one, especially if I'm leading services that night. It has a smaller capacity, so I don't drink too much wine before I go lead services. But for today, we're going to drink out of this Kiddush cup. And that is to say, pretty much any Kiddush cup is okay. It needs to have a kind of a certain minimal quantity to it. If you're at the synagogue and you're just drinking out of like the little ketchup cups or whatever, that's fine. If you're leading other people in Kiddush, it's nice to have, the rabbis look for a kos yafeh, like a beautiful cup. It should be something nice. If you don't have anything nice, if you can't afford anything nice, or you're moving and your nice stuff's in a box or something like that, you can totally make Kiddush like with a Dixie cup. Now you shouldn't use your hand. That's a little messy. But like a Dixie cup or, red Solo cups are okay too. But it should be something special if you can. So this one's very special to me. We'll be making Kiddush with this cup today. And let's see what else we got going on here. We can't have wine without a little bit of bread. So I have this bread right here. This doesn't look like bread. This looks like textiles. But this is a challah cover. When we have bread on the table for Shabbat dinner, it's our custom to cover it up until we're ready to bless with the bread. And so we have this nice challah cover. Our friends, the Rotenbergs, I think gave this. This is a wedding gift for me and my wife. And ta-da, it's got bread in it. Now, these are not chalot. Often people will have these big, long loaves of braided bread or small loaves of braided bread. The thing is, any bread will do, pretty much. I'm teaching traditions here. I'm teaching how people commonly do things. And I teach, how people do things to the utmost. With most of these rituals, it doesn't have to be exactly perfect. You can make do with what you have, especially if you're just learning, right? And that's what this video is about, is learning. And so today I have 2 little rolls because one of the rules of blessings with bread is, once you bless it, you got to eat it. And if, I'm alone in my apartment right now, if I bless 2 giant loaves of challah, I would have to eat 2 loaves of challah. And as it is, if you've been following my videos, I'm going to be breaking my ketogenic diet today by even taking a bite of one of these, much less eating both of them. So I guess, sandwiches at my place after the video. So I've got these 2 pieces of bread. We're going to learn the blessing for that. Cover that back up. But before we can say a blessing with the bread, it's customary to wash our hands. And there's a special way of washing our hands. It's not like a hygienic hand washing where, a squirt of Purell would do the same thing. We have a special ritual of washing hands. And so I have a little glass of water here for demonstration purposes and a basin to pour it into so my carpet doesn't get wet. People have different customs for this. Sometimes they buy like a fancy copper laver or plastic pitcher or something. I often just use a glass of water because that's handy. The point of the washing isn't the receptacle; it's the water. And so sometimes I'll just use a glass in the kitchen sink, but for these purposes, I'll use a little basin, and you'll see what I mean in a minute. So what do we got? I got the candles, I got the bread, I got the wine, I got the hand washing stuff. And I am set for a traditional opening of Shabbat and the Shabbat meal. So the first thing that we do is light candles. Before I get into that, I'm just going to take a pause, give a shout out to my friends who are in the chat today. It looks like we got 10 people watching right now. Oh my goodness gracious. It's like a work day, isn't it? So I'm sorry, I'm just joking around. We have people all across different time zones watching these videos, and I really appreciate everyone who does. So we've got Ruthie is here, Kathy is here, Val is here, says recovering from surgery. Refuah Shlema, like I wish you a speedy recovery, complete healing. Thank you for being here in your time of recovery. My friend Carla is here, Vanessa is here. Thanks for coming in, everybody. I see people, just because I know these folks, we got people from California to I'll say Germany is the other extreme, east and west. If I'm wrong about that, throw it in here. I think we've got maybe a Florida or two in the mix. So thank you for showing up, everybody. Really appreciate this. Again, the camera angle's a little off, so it's not going to look exactly like my other videos. And if you are tuning into this video, one of my videos for the first time, know that I've got like 170 videos on this channel, and basic and some not so basic concepts of Judaism and Jewish rituals and practices that you can learn about, Jewish words that you may be hearing for the first time. And so feel free after this video is over to go check out one of those other ones. Some of them are longer, like I've been doing a lot of hour-long live videos on really digging deep onto a particular topic. Some of them are really short. I think my shortest video is like the entire Tanakh or the Hebrew Bible in 90 seconds. So if you want to learn all about the Hebrew Bible in 90 seconds, I've got that out there too. Other things about Shabbat. Did another thing about the restricted activities of Shabbat this week. And also not just the restrictions, but ways that you can celebrate Shabbat. That's another video that we had out this week. So check those out. Learn more about Shabbat. Today I thought I would do something eminently practical. And practical based on the idea that this is some of the first questions that my students ask me. It's like, okay, Rabbi, I get theology and philosophy, blah, blah, blah. How do I light Shabbat candles? So that's what we're going to focus on today. Feel free at any time to jump into the chat, ask me whatever question is on your mind, and we'll pause from time to time for Q&A. And at the end, I'll make sure that I go through the questions and answer any questions that are left unanswered. Except if you're just being weird. It's like, hey, Rabbi, why is the sky blue? I might not answer that question. I'm not a physicist. So let's go ahead and jump in to do this. People tuned in to learn about Shabbat, so let's do some learning. Okay, the first thing we do, I'm going to change the camera angle a little bit so you can see my candles. It's highly technical work. One of these days, we'll have 2 cameras for this channel. But for right now, we get this one. And so I've got 2 candles here. Right? And one way that we traditionally usher in Shabbat, mark the beginning of Shabbat, is that we light candles. And again, you can light, pretty much any kind of candles. Any kind of candlesticks are fine. I like these fancy ones. I actually got these when I was studying in Jerusalem several years ago. And so these are like my favorites. We actually have 6. I'm just going to do 2 today. People have different customs. Typically, we light at least 2. If you can't afford 2 candles, light 1 candle. If you can afford 2 candles, light 2 candles. Some households do it so they light 2 candles, and that's it all the time. Some light them for every member of the family. And so many weeks we light 6 candles because there's me, and then there's my wife, and then I've got 4 kids, and so we light 4 more candles. But for today, we're just going to do 2, and that's fine. So I've got them in these candlesticks. You'll see I've got these little foil wrappers on there. That's just for convenience. It makes the candles easier, the candlesticks easier to clean afterwards. You can use tea lights, are very convenient. It should be a candle that burns for 4 hours ish. So long enough to get through a really nice leisurely dinner and hanging out with your family, hanging out with your friends, but not so long that you would want to like blow them out, so that you could go to sleep and not, worry about your house burning down. So, I'll go to the grocery store and make it easy for myself and get Shabbos candles, right? That's just an Ashkenazic way of saying Shabbat. You can find these in the kosher section of any grocery store that has a kosher section. And if not, you can order them online. Maybe I'll throw a link in the notes to this video for an Amazon link to buy Shabbat candles in bulk. That's a thing that people do. So I've got my candles. This is the first thing that we do on Friday night is light candles. Well, the first thing we do for Shabbat. God willing, you've been cooking and all sorts of other stuff, making your dinner so you can get all your work done. Laundry's out of the, all out of the wash. The food is all cooked. Anything work related, you've got squared away. Shut your laptop, put your phone in a drawer, and just so you can relax, totally relax for Shabbat. So I'm gonna put these where there's a little bit of contrast. And so a custom that we have when we've got the Shabbat candles, there's a special way that you should light them. This relates to the Jewish law of how we don't light fires on Shabbat. And so we light the candles before Shabbat, but then we cover our eyes when we say the blessing, and then we uncover our eyes, and then we can see the candles. And it's like we just lit the candles, but Shabbat's already started. I talk about that in a different video. Refer to it there. But the typical way to light candles, and some people ask me, what are you doing? You're a man. Why are you lighting Shabbat candles? Isn't that woman's work? In many households and many communities, the tradition is that the mother of the house or woman of the house will do the Shabbat candle lighting, and any other women in the house will join for that. That doesn't mean that only women can do it. It means that this is a custom that often women are the ones who light Shabbat candles. However, if you are a man and you're celebrating Shabbat by yourself, you can totally light Shabbat candles, okay? I trust you guys. You can figure this out. I know women are smarter, but you can totally figure this out. So the first thing we do, lighting fire on the internet without a permit. So we light the candles first. And, we don't blow out the match, but maybe wave it or something like that. And set that someplace fireproof. So I've got 2 candles here. And before I get into the blessing, there's a thing that people do. Again, this is not really based in Jewish law per se, but it's a custom that we have. And I've seen this in many households and in schools where they teach little kids how to do this stuff. What we do is we bring in the light, right? And so you might see people wave their hands 3 times where they go, whoop. They don't make that sound, but they just bring in the light, wave your hands, sort of gathering the light in 3 times, and they cover their eyes. And then they say the blessing. And the covering eyes isn't like, full Oculus Rift, can't see anything at all. The main thing is that you block out the visibility of the candle flames. So I cover my eyes enough that I can't see the candle flames. And here's the blessing. And I'm going to say it kind of slow. I'm not going to sing it. There are lots of different tunes to it. And I'll commend your attention to Google searching or YouTube searching Shabbat candlelight song. And then you can find multiple different traditional tunes to it. My wife has a tune that goes very high, and she's a soprano, so I trust her. But I'm just going to say it slowly so that you can learn it. And all of these blessings are, for people who are worried about this, they're l'shem hinuch. They're for the sake of education. I'm not actually creating Shabbat right now, but it's okay to teach blessings in their full content for the sake of people learning them. And that's what we're doing. And so and no more digressions, I promise. Maybe one. Okay, that's it. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech ha'olam asher kidshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu lahadlik ner shel Shabbat. And then I uncover my eyes. And anybody present may, say that along with me, or else say amen afterwards, and it's as if they've said it themselves. What that blessing means is we bless God, ruler of our lives, or sovereign, however you want to see that, who makes our lives special with mitzvot, with commandments, including the commandment for lighting Shabbat candles. And somebody says, hey, wait a minute, Rabbi, I was reading the Torah the other day, and I didn't see a single reference to lighting candles. And where this mitzvah comes from, the rabbis derived this from what it does say in the Tanakh. It comes from a passage in Yeshayahu. I think it's Isaiah, I want to say 58:13, where it says, you shall call Shabbat a delight. And the rabbis look at that and say, well, what's delightful? If we want to make Shabbat a delight, what's delightful? You know what's delightful? Candlelight dinner is delightful. And so we're going to have candlelight dinner. And so we're going to have 2 candles there, and we're going to light those in the beginning of Shabbat. And when I say in the beginning, you might ask, okay, what's the proper time to do this? First off, they should be lit before sundown. The halacha, the Jewish law, is that they should be lit 18 minutes before sundown or more. So 18 minutes or more before sundown is when you should light candles. You shouldn't light them at like 9 o'clock in the morning. That's too much. But you should light them, close to sundown, but not too close to sundown. And the traditional buffer is 18 minutes. If it's 17, that's okay. 16, 15, that's okay. Sometimes you're rushing in, you got a lot of stuff to do before Shabbat starts. We have a nice 18-minute window. The ideal time to light Shabbat candles is 18 minutes before the sun goes down. And you can find these times out for various, candle lightings, whether it's the beginning of Shabbat, end of Shabbat, beginning of holidays, right time to say afternoon prayers, all sorts of things. There's a great website called myzmanim.com, myzmanim.com, and that's a site you could go to, plug in your zip code or country or city, and it'll tell you what the right times are for doing these things, and even give you a few options depending on the rabbis that you follow. So we've lit Hanukkah? We've lit Shabbat candles. And I'm just going to jump into the chat, see if anybody has any questions about that before I move on. This is kind of a big one. This is like, I don't want to diminish it by calling it a starter mitzvah, but because everybody can do it. But this is one of the first mitzvot that people learn how to do when they're learning how to observe Judaism in a traditional way. So we've got lighting Shabbat candles. Let's see, somebody says, I'm an RVer. When you're lighting Shabbat candles, find a nice fireproof place to light Shabbat candles. We got somebody from Chula Vista at 7,200 feet. I assume that's elevation. And are candles kosher? Now let's see. Let's check the box. This is, this probably says they're kosher. I don't worry about it too much. I usually just get these Shabbos candles. What makes them kosher or not kosher is that they're made out of paraffin wax and not, let's say, the rendered fat of an unkosher animal. So the only circumstance in which the candles could be unkosher would be if they're made from an animal that's not a kosher animal. And that's not a concern for most people today. I'll say in America. I know I've got people watching from someplace other than America, but most of the places you buy candles, they're not made out of animal fat. They're made out of wax. It used to be very common to make candles out of things like beef tallow, which is like rendered beef fat, or other animals. Cows are kosher, but sometimes you might get fat from an animal that wasn't slaughtered correctly, or people would, I don't know if people made candles out of pork tallow, God forbid. But most candles you buy, you don't have to worry about it too much. If you are concerned about it, just check the box. Even if it doesn't have a heksher or a kosher symbol on it, just say if they're made out of paraffin, which I'm not a scientist, but I believe is a petroleum byproduct, you're fine. And if you get like a bag of tea lights at IKEA, you're fine. My opinion. Your mileage may vary. Ask your personal rabbi. So these are the candles. They're lit. What do we do next? Often, what we do in my house is we sing a song. I don't have a prop for this song. We sing a song called Shalom Alechem. And here's the thing. You can light the candles way before you have dinner, or you can light them right before you have dinner. Sometimes those times are far apart in extreme seasons. But you light candles, it doesn't depend on dinner time. It depends on Shabbat time. When you have dinner, that is what initiates the other things. So when we are ready to gather around the table for dinner, I'm just going to check my camera angle there. What we do is we sing this song, Shalom Alechem. And it goes, I'll just do a little bit so if you're familiar with the tune, it goes, Shalom Alechem, Malachei HaSharet. And then you'll find this, just look for this song on YouTube. You can find it to that tune. I've heard Shalom Alechem, Malachei HaSharet. There's all sorts of different ways to sing this song. So I'm not going to sing a lot of songs today because I want you to find one that you like. But I will teach the words that I need to teach. So we get around the table, we sing Shalom Alechem. It's about 4 verses long. It talks about, angels coming in and protecting us and blessing us for Shabbat. That's kind of the content of that song. And then what do we do after that? We bless our children. So one thing we do before we start eating and start saying blessings with wine and bread and other consumable products is we bless children. Now, this is for people who have children. They don't necessarily need to be biological children, I don't think. They could be adopted children. They could be the children of friends that have come over to your house. Sometimes I have friends over who are still learning the blessings, and I'll bless all the children on their behalf, and or they can bless their own children. But we have this traditional blessing that we say, and it's in 2 parts with options, I'll say. So we say this blessing that asks God to bless our children with happiness like God did for the children of our ancestors. So in the case of a male child, we would say, Yesimcha Elohim ke'Ephraim v'hi Menashe. I'll do that again slowly. Yesimcha Elohim ke'Ephraim v'hi Menashe. And what that means is, may God bring you joy like God did to Ephraim and Manasseh, who were the sons of Joseph, and Joseph was the son of Jacob or Israel. And so these are the grandchildren of Jacob who he meets for the first time visiting his son who's done very well for himself in Egypt. But these are sort of a symbol of children, right? And boys who did very well and had a good life. And so we say that to sons. If you have daughters in the room, then there's another blessing for that. We say, Yesimech, Elohim, Kasara, Rivka, Rachel, Valeah. And that means we ask God to bless with happiness, or to make happy our children, like God created happiness for Sarah, Rebecca, Rachel, and Leah, our foremothers, our matriarchs, if you will. And so you could do those, if you just have daughters, you just do the daughter ones. If you just have sons, you just do the sons ones. And if you have both, take turns. So my sons are grown and out of the house, so we don't you do the Yesimcha much, except when they're here. So usually for us, it's just daughters. And then after you do this blessing, depending on the gender of your child, you say another blessing, and this one's pretty special. It is the Birkat Kohanim, or the priestly blessing. And it's called the priestly blessing because this is the blessing that the priests in the time of the temple would use to bless all of the people of Israel. And this blessing is written down in the book of Numbers, or Sefer Bamidbar. When you look at different blessings and things like that, most of these blessings were written by the rabbis in rabbinic times. There's not a lot of blessings that we use today that are directly from the Torah. This one is one of 2 exceptions, which means this is the oldest known blessing in continuous use. It's certainly the oldest blessing that we have. And now that we don't have the temple and a priestly class anymore, we still use this blessing on a few special occasions. We often use this blessing to bless a couple that's just been married. We say this blessing for somebody who's just converted, right when they get out of the mikveh. This is one of the blessings that we give. And my teacher, Adam Greenwald, always says, I'm going to give the oldest blessing that we have to the world's newest Jew. And I think that's amazing. I think that's wonderful. So I encourage that. But in this case, we take this oldest blessing we have and we bless the young people in our house. After we've asked God to give them happiness like God did for our ancestors, we bless them with the priestly blessing, the Birkat Kohanim, or the 3-part blessing. This has been translated into other faiths as well as part of their heritage. but in Hebrew it goes like this. Yivarechecha Adonai v'yishmerecha, Ya'er Adonai panav elecha v'chuneka, Yisa Adonai panav elecha v'yasem lecha shalom. And that means roughly, may God bless you and protect you. May God's face illuminate your path and give you grace. And may God always be facing you with kindness and give you peace. So that's a rough translation of the priestly blessing. And so, again, start with Shalom. Start with the candles when you sit down at the table. Shalom Alechem. Bless the children with their unique blessings based on whether they're boys or girls, and then with the priestly blessing. There is a custom in many households for, let's say, a husband to bless a wife, or for a wife to bless a wife, or for people to bless women. And there's a song called Eshet Chayil. It starts like Eshet Chayil Mimsa, but again, that's a particular tune that I learned. There are other tunes for this. But this is essentially reading, I believe, Proverbs chapter 31, where Samuel is talking about, what's a praiseworthy partner to have, and lists all the qualities of a praiseworthy partner. And so in some households, it's a custom for a person to bless his partner by singing this song to her. And again, you do it how your family does it. Most of the time I don't get to, because my wife says it's too long and she wants to eat. So I just say, "You're awesome." And she says, "Thank you. Now get on with the blessings." So she's a very, very pious woman, but usually in a hurry. So I've got the candles. I've got Shalom Alechem. We bless the children. I've told my wife she's awesome. Now what do? I think it's time to eat. Okay? But before we eat, we have to drink. It's a bit of an aperitif. So the next thing is Kiddush. Now, Kiddush means sanctifying. Shabbat is holy in its own right. What we are doing is we are declaring or commemorating the holiness of Shabbat. Once again, there is nothing in the Torah that says explicitly, you shall say a blessing to God with a cup of wine in the beginning of Shabbat. What it does say in the Torah, in the Ten Commandments, in fact, is Zachor et Yom HaShabbat leKodsho. And you hear that Kodsho is kind of like Kiddush, isn't it? That means remember the Sabbath day to sanctify it, or to make it holy, or to set it apart. And so we say, okay, what does it mean to remember? Do I just think about it in my head? Is it possible that I forgot that it's Shabbat? I got all this food on the table and all these people over. The word remember in that sense, I like to translate more as commemorate. And the connection between this commemoration and this cup of wine, it's grape juice actually, it's a little early in the day for me. The connection is in Maimonides, where Maimonides says, okay, how do we remember Shabbat? How do we commemorate this holy time? We do it in the beginning and the end. We remember or commemorate something kind of at its borders, if you will. So we remember the sanctity of Shabbat at its beginning and at its end. In the beginning, we do that with Kiddush. This is something we do at Shabbat and holiday occasions, and also make kind of a Kiddush at weddings and Brit Milah and other happy occasions. We bless God for giving us joy on those happy occasions. And the symbol for joy, guys, is wine. You could do grape juice. You could do other things. I talked about this the other day, where basically any beverage that your community is accustomed to celebrating with is an okay beverage for Kiddush. The blessing changes slightly if you're using something other than wine, but that's okay. We're going to do wine today. And the first thing I'm going to teach you is I'll say the basic blessing for when you're having wine or a grape beverage of some kind. And then I'll teach you the longer Kiddush for Shabbat. Now, it's longer. It takes practice. You'll need to find like a written source to practice with. But I want you to hear what a traditional Shabbat Kiddush sounds like. And then you can go Google that, find another tune that you like. There are great resources out there. The very basic blessing, anytime you're drinking wine or grape juice or liquid grape product of any kind, I don't know about grape drink, but or grape Kool-Aid or something, depends on if there's any real grapes in there, is Borei Peri Hagafen. We bless God who creates the fruit of the vine. So basically any fruit that grows off a vine, but we're usually talking about grapes. So if I have a cup of wine, I will say, and I'm just going to do this sort of l'shem hinuk, and I'm going to bless it again in a second, so it's going to be kind of twice blessed. But again, this is just for learning purposes. If you have a cup of grape juice or wine, you say, Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam borei peri hagafen. And we bless God, who is the sovereign of our world and who creates the fruit of the vine. And then we drink it. Typically, when you're saying a blessing right before a mitzvah, you should do the mitzvah right after the blessing without a whole lot of break. So just to connect those two. So that's the basic blessing. If you're just learning how to do this, I suggest starting there. It's I think like 9 words or something altogether. Didn't actually count them. But it's, again, one of the first blessings that people learn how to say. And so you can say that anytime that you're drinking juice or grape juice or wine, but especially on Shabbat and special occasions. That's the basic version. The longer version, for people who want to learn the longer version, and I don't know if I could say it slowly, because usually I'm just doing it from memory. I'm singing a song. It kind of goes quick because, again, everybody's hungry. So I'll say it as slowly as I can, but I suggest that you find another source online that you can learn from, or play this one over and over again until you learn it. The Shabbat Kiddush is a little more involved. The first thing we do is we cite a passage from the Torah, which is, if I'm not mistaken, the 2nd chapter of Genesis. When it starts talking about Shabbat for the first time, we call out how God sanctified the 7th day of the week, and that's why we're doing what we're doing, right? And then we say the blessing for grape juice or wine. And then we say a special blessing for sanctifying Shabbat. It ends with Mekadesh HaShabbat. We bless God who sanctifies the Sabbath. So first we talk about God sanctifying the first Sabbath. Then we talk about how wonderful Shabbat is, that we are free, we don't have to work. We even mention Yetziat Mitzrayim, which means when we left Egypt, right? So Shabbat isn't just about resting because God rested that day. Shabbat is a commemoration of our freedom, because being able to take a Shabbat is intricately connected to being a free people, right? If you are a slave, you don't get to pick what days you take off if you get to take a day off. A free person can make that decision for themselves, and sometimes there are costs and consequences and things like that. But this hallmark of our freedom is the ability to say no to work for a whole day each week. And so this is how the traditional Kiddush goes. And so you pick up the cup. Somebody asked me the other day, it's just sort of a custom that people grab the cup from the bottom and sort of a cupping motion, if you will. Kind of got my hands all the way around this. Somebody asked me the reason for this. I wasn't 100% sure, but I looked it up. It's actually a Kabbalistic thing. There's mystical significance to holding the cup, and your hands are like a rose with the petals of a rose surrounding the cup. But if you're going to do Shabbat Kiddush, it goes a little something like this. Vayerev vayvoker yom hashishi, vayhulu hashamayim v'haaretz, v'kol tzavam, vayhal Elohim bayom hashvi, malakto asher asav, vayvarak Elohim et yom hashvi. Well, kind of lost my place there. This is live video. That's very embarrassing. So I'm going to go a little bit faster. I'm accustomed to. Vayerev vayvoker yom hashishi, that means it was morning, it was evening, the 6th day. Vayvarak Elohim et yom hashvi, vaykadesh oto, ki vo shavat mikol melakto asher bara Elohim lasot. I'm having one of those brain dead days. This is embarrassing. I've been having some memory issues lately, so I'm going to see if I can find something. Let's see. I hope this doesn't get an ambulance called or something. Don't freak out. I'll just be right back. All right, everybody. Sorry if that was a little bit disturbing for you. Normally, I do this every single Friday night from memory, and it's like when you're talking to somebody who you've known for years and you can't remember their name. I hope that's not indicative of any other health problems, but I'm sure it'll be fine. So it's actually okay to say it from a text. In fact, it's recommended for just such an occasion. So often, lately with Shabbat blessings, I just do them by memory. But in this case, I'm going to go from a book, and this is just my pocket Siddur. You have other books that have the Shabbat blessings in them and that you could read out of. Some people read out of a Siddur every single time just to avoid something like that. But I think in a way I've just taught you something about the fact that it's okay to use the script. You don't have to memorize everything or be perfect every single time. So let's try this again. Vayera vayvoker yom hashishi, vayhulu hashemayim v'haaretz v'kol tzavam, vayhal Elohim bayom hashvi'i melakto asher asa, vayishbot bayom hashvi'i mikol melakto asher asa, vayvarek Elohim et yom hashvi'i vaykadesh oto, ki vo shavat mikol melakto asher bara Elohim la'asot. And once again, that's the passage of the Torah that talks about God making the world in 6 days, calling it a day on the sixth day, and then creating the Shabbat for a day of rest and refraining from work. And then we say, Savri, Chavrai, Mishpachti, Maranan, something like that. We basically are, it's like cheers or, by your permission, everybody here. People say L'chaim, and then you continue. And you've heard this one before. Baruch Atanai Eloheinu melech haolam borei pari hagafen. Again, that's just the blessing for wine or grape juice. And then here's the longer blessing, the Kiddush for Shabbat, which really makes it Kiddush. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kidshanu b'mitzvotav, v'ratzavanu, v'shabbat kodsho, be'ava uvratzon, hinhilanu zikaron l'maseh v'reshit, ki hu yom techila mikrei kodesh, zecher litziat mitzrayim, ki vanu v'acharta, v'otanu kidashta, mikol ha'amim, v'shabbat kodshecha be'ahava uvratzon, hinhaltanu baruch atah Adonai, mikadesh haShabbat. All right. So that is the Kiddush for Shabbat. And you notice those last two words, Mikadesh HaShabbat, we bless God who sanctifies the seventh day. So that is what we're doing for Kiddush. And now that I've wet my whistle, I'm hungry for bread. But as I said before we can eat bread, at least in this setting, we like to wash our hands. Now, some people just say, B'rei B'ri Guffin for the juice, and then they say the blessing for bread, and that's fine. That's one way to do it. I'm trying to give you the whole traditional spread here. Before we bless the bread, we might wash our hands. And so for this, again, I'm just going to use a simple glass. Some people use something a little bit more elaborate, like a laver or a decorative item, but we're just going to use a glass of water, and that's okay. So usually when you're filling up the glass of water, you pick it up in your left hand, and again, this has sort of mystical, Kabbalistic significance to it. But the way we do it is, before I do that, I'm going to take my ring off, because people typically take any kind of jewelry off of their hands first. And then you hold it in your left hand to pass it to your right. Or excuse me, you hold in your right hand to pass it to your left. And then with your left hand, you wash your right hand. And then you switch and you wash your left. And you do this 3 times. Some people really like to douse their hands fully with a lot of water. I learned this from my Rav, Rabbi Aaron Alexander, who gave a special version of this for the fact that we live in a desert, which is usually in a water shortage. So he asked the question, what's the minimal amount of water you could use? And came up with a new kind of hand washing that way. That's perfectly appropriate, but takes a little bit less water. So it's sort of more environmentally friendly, if you will. So you hold in your left hand, and you just kind of, wash the tips of your fingers. And then you do the other hand, and then you repeat. And then a third time, both hands. And then you hold them up. Before you dry them off, you hold them up and you say the blessing for hand washing, which is Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kidshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu al netilat yadayim. And we bless God, again, who makes our lives special with commandments, including the commandment for washing hands, or literally means like lifting up hands, but they knew that meant kind of washing hands. And so once your hands are clean, I'm actually breaking kind of a rule right now, once again, for the sake of education. There's a custom that between washing your hands and taking your first bite of challah, you don't speak. As I said before, when you say a blessing over doing a thing, you should say the blessing and then immediately do the thing without any kind of break or conversation, so that you know that that blessing is associated with doing that thing or eating that food that you just did a blessing with. In this case, hand washing is connected to the motzi, to the blessing for bread. And so, as not to have a separation, you try to make it one continuous act, and you preserve that by not speaking. And so sometimes if you've got a big group of people, people are washing their hands, it takes a little while between washing hands and somebody's saying motzi, the blessing for the bread. And so people will start to talk and people will start to gossip. And so we try to discourage that. We just try to have that quiet moment. If you are super uncomfortable with silence, no talking doesn't mean no singing. And so again, in large settings where there might be a gap of time between washing hands and eating bread, it's perfectly acceptable to do a nigun, which is a wordless melody. Just people just just something that gets the crowd in a frame of mind that is something other than gossip. The best nigun I've ever heard for this is one time I was having Shabbat lunch over at a friend's house who's a rabbi today, but he started a nigun and he wanted to do something that everybody would know. So he started it like this, and I hope this isn't a copyright violation on YouTube, but he said, dun 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 in that very Hasidic style, and everybody knew that song immediately. And to this day, I call it the Vader Niggin. But that's just a little story about Shabbat. So now that I've washed my hands, pretend I haven't been talking. It's time for the bread, and you've left the bread covered until now. One reason for this custom is that we like to preserve sort of the modesty of the bread in the context of having wine there. It sounds a little weird, I know, but the bread and the wine are both wonderful, or rather the blessing and the ceremony around the bread and the wine are both wonderful, and we like to keep those wonderful things separate so they don't blend too much and kind of lose their luster in comparison to the other. So we keep the bread covered while we're making Kiddush and doing the other things, and then we only uncover the bread when it's time to bless it. So, ta-da! It's a custom to have two breads. Like challah is traditional, and it's usually parve too if you're having a meat meal. Those long braided loaves of bread. But legit, any bread will do. It just has to be sort of whole and like not sliced or broken. You should have a whole loaf. That's why for our purposes, I'm just using two little rolls because I know I can finish these today. But for Shabbat, you should have two. And one of the reasons we do this is that it's related to the man. It's related to the manna by which God fed us when we were in the wilderness and didn't have the wherewithal to get food. God would feed us every day. God would put food on the ground every night while we slept, and then we would go out and gather a day's worth of food, and that's all that was there. But God said, okay, don't want you working on Shabbat, so here's what we're going to do. We're going to put out twice as much food on Friday, and you gather that, and that way you can rest on Shabbat. You don't have to gather that food. And that's one of the reasons that we have two loaves of bread whenever we're making a motzi, whenever we're doing a blessing with bread for Shabbat. And you might also have two at lunchtime and a couple at dinner as well. But we like to have two, and so you put them together, and then we say this blessing by which the meaning of which is we bless God, again, sovereign of our universe, who brings forth bread from the earth. Hamotzi lechem min haaretz. And so, hold the bread together. Sometimes people put salt on it. That's not a universal thing, but it's very common that you'll see people put salt on the bread. The bread is also related to what's called the show bread, or the waving bread in the temple times. And a lot of the things that we do are reminiscent of temple services. And when the priests would offer sacrificial meat at the altar, they would salt it first. And so that's one of the reasons I've heard for why we salt the bread first. Other people say so that the blessing can include two different things, bread and salt. So we usually have a number of number of stories as to where our traditions come from, but you can salt it or not. You just need to have two, ideally, if you can afford it, and they should be whole and unbroken. You don't take like 2 slices of Wonder Bread necessarily. So here's the blessing that we say, and you can do this like stalling. You can do this blessing anytime that you're eating bread. Anytime you're eating bread by itself. Not in like a sandwich or pizza or something like that, but just taking a bite of bread. This is the blessing that you use. There are other blessings for like sandwiches and pizza that contain bread but aren't principally bread. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam hamotzi lechem min haaretz. Again, we bless God for bringing bread from the earth. All right, so long, ketogenesis. That was delicious. That's the first bread I've had since Shabbat. And then you eat. Those are the Shabbat dinner blessings that we say. Today we learned about blessing candles. And we learned a little bit about songs we sing at the table, including Shalom Alechem, the song about angels, and Eshet Chayil, the song about how wonderful it is to have a life partner who's so industrious. We have a blessing for our children. Boys and girls get distinctive blessings, and they also get the same blessing, which happens to be the oldest blessing that we have, the priestly blessing. And then from there, we move toward eating mode, and we bless God for the bounty that we have, right? For the joy that Shabbat and other things and the family around us or the friends around us bring into our life. And our symbol for joy is wine. And we can also use grape juice. You can do beer. It's a slightly different blessing. Hit me up if you want to hear the beer blessing. Another video. But we bless God for giving us wine. We bless God for making our lives special by giving us the commandment to wash our hands before we eat. And also, we bless God for bringing forth bread from the earth. And at that point, Shabbos is yours. Do with it what you will, and you can enjoy dinner. There's an additional blessing or set of blessings afterward, Birkat Hamazon. I'm not going to do that today, but these are grace after meals that you could say after any meal, and there's a little bit of extra words in there if you're doing it on Shabbat. So I'm going to take some time to go into the chat just to answer any questions that have come up. I'll also say what we learned today is it's okay sometimes if you make mistakes. Don't freak out. Don't think God's going to be mad at you. You get to make mistakes and you get to recover from them. That's what tshuva is for. It's also okay to use a prayer book if you need the words to help you out. So let's see what's going on in the chat. Go up the top. We see Grape up here. Are candles kosher? We answered that one. There's an app called, Ruthie says there's an app. We're talking about apps for Shabbat times. Ruthie says there's an app called Shabbat Times. I trust you. I have an app too. It's called something else. It's called Pocket Luach. But I also like to use the MyZmanim website. Suzanne asks, can you spell the website much slower? MyZmanim.com. MyZmanim. Zmanim means times, and that's what people look at it for. Hey there all, quick question about lighting the candle. I have 2 young kids. Can I light the candle early, like 5 p.m.? You absolutely can. It's ideal to do it before Shabbat, but roughly any time before Shabbat is fine. We like to say maybe within like an hour and a quarter. Like you can start Shabbat early at a time that's called Plag HaMincha, which is a halakhic designation of time, which is usually about an hour and 15 minutes before the sun goes down. I've heard special rulings for people who live in places like, Bangor, Maine, or Siberia, or Alaska, which might have radically different sundown times. If you live in a place like that, hit me up and I'll help you find those sources. But it's not, I usually stay pretty close to the equator if I can. Sing Shalom Alechem for Shabbat dinner. Yes, you should. I'm not going to sing the entire thing, but there's some great recordings online. If I am the only Jew in the household, can I light candles? Yes, you can. It's a Jewish thing, and if you're Jewish, you totally can light candles. You can even teach, the other people in the household about lighting candles. So that's a great question from Jean Guillaume, DB. I think that's the first time I'm seeing you here, so welcome to the community. Let's see, and we have other people answering these questions too. I have the best students who jump in and answer questions. Vanessa asks, Does it have to be two separate individual candlesticks, or can you use a candlestick with two or more candles? If I'm understanding it, let's say if you have a single object that holds multiple candles, that's okay. You should have separate candles. Like the candles should be separate from each other so that you can see that there are two. And the reason I like this is we haven't talked about Havdalah. We'll do that in another video, I think. In Havdalah, we usually have a single candle that is multiple wicks braided together, right? And that's got sort of a distinctive significance to it. So if you can afford more than one candle, you should have two or more candles. But if you only have one fixed object that holds all of them, that's totally okay. I just happen to have two candlesticks here. Right. Grace says, Kiddush, sanctify to make Shabbat holy. Very good. Kosher wine and grape juice. So there's a multiple of opinions on the kashrut of wine and grape juice. The easiest thing to do is to follow the strictest opinion, which is you should get something that is hechshered or has a kosher label on it. This certifies various aspects of the religious law of making wine, including who it's made by and what the ingredients are, and just to make sure that there's no other stuff in there, because it happens that different traditions of making wine contain what are called fining agents. Fining agents make the wine clear instead of cloudy, which makes the lees settle to the bottom of the bottle. And some of those fining agents have non-kosher sources, right? And historically, way back in some people have used isinglass, which is made from the secretions of a fish that's not necessarily kosher. Some traditions have used ox blood for this purpose, like used animal blood, poured it in the wine because the proteins then bind with particles and they precipitate. So people have literally used blood to make wine clearer, and it all kind of settles at the bottom. You're not necessarily, straight up vampiring it. But sangre de toro is called sangre de toro for a reason, if you're familiar with Spanish wines. And so the safest thing to do if you're concerned about the kashrut of wine is to get a hechshered bottle of wine. Again, like I said, there are a variety of opinions about this. Rabbi Elliot Dorff wrote an incredible tshuva about, I want to say like 1986, where he went to different wine manufacturing places in the U.S. And he lives in California. I live in California. We make a lot of wine in California. And so Rabbi Dorff went to various places where wine was manufactured and observed the process and was convinced that in modern day productions that none of these unkosher ingredients are at all remaining in the wine. So it's not possible to accidentally drink blood while you're drinking wine. I know it's kind of gross. Sorry, anybody. But so Rabbi Dorff said you can trust that if you are drinking, I want to put it carefully, if you are drinking domestically, in America, domestically produced wines, you are not drinking anything that is, by its nature, ingredient-wise, unkosher. There are other aspects to the kashrut of wine that have to do with religion, in the sense that one concern was yain nesek, meaning if I'm drinking wine, how do I know that somebody on the assembly line didn't take the wine and pour a little bit out on behalf of Zeus or something? Fewer Zeus worshippers to worry about these days, and so less of a concern. Another reason for the kashrut of wine is that it keeps people separate. I mean, it keeps, Jews are drinking Jewish wines with Jews, and other people are drinking wine with other people, and so that's a little bit of the history of it, but part of the history that I'm not necessarily fond of or agree with in current practice. So I have complicated feelings about the kashrut of wine. Actually did my master's thesis on it, so I've studied more of it than you probably want to know. If you're having other people over and you're concerned that they may require or insist on kosher wine, have some. I'll say probably the best solution, if you're a wine person and you're like, Manischewitz is not my brand, because it tastes like cough syrup. I'm not going to lie to you. Israel today makes some really high quality wines and some really delicious wines. And so if you're concerned that, I think I need to have wine that's stamped with a hechsher, that is a kosher mark, and I don't want it to taste like cough syrup, I highly recommend looking at some of the kosher vineyards in America, but especially Israeli wines, because Israeli wines are traditionally not mevushal, which means boiled. That's part of the process of rendering wine kosher, is this sort of flash boiling that goes on. And if that sounds yucky to you, that was kind of the point. And so you can get non-boiled kosher wines from Eretz Yisrael, and they are delicious. I've sampled a couple of them. Let's see. Kosher wine and grape juice. Then you can have 2 or more candles in one candelabra. What if you do not have wine or grape juice? So because I said I was going to, I'll go ahead and throw it in. It's really not a long blessing. Other beverages that you might drink. You can drink anything or use anything for Kiddush that is not water. That's the one thing that when they get into the weeds and they're looking at difficult circumstances, let's say I've been kidnapped by Vikings and they only drink mead. Can I do Kiddush with mead? Yes, you absolutely can. You can do it with all sorts of things. What if all I have is water? The rabbi said, use bread. You can actually make Kiddush with bread instead of a beverage. It doesn't have to be a beverage. That's just the custom. And so if you were making Kiddush with bread, that part where it says B'rei Pri Hagafen, you would instead say Hamotzi Lechem Min Haaretz, and then maybe you got your bread thing covered too. If you are drinking something that it's not a grape product, a safe blessing to use, and because this is like the catch-all blessing for everything that doesn't have its own blessing, is called the Shehakol. It goes like this. Let's see. I should have something. I'll just teach it to you without consuming anything because I think it remains true. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam shehakol niyeh bidvaro. And that last bit again is shehakol niyeh bidvaro. Bidvaro. There's that last word. And that's we bless God, ruler of the universe, who creates everything by his word. And so that's a blessing that we use for, for example, this was true at the last synagogue I was at, the synagogue where I'm serving presently. When it's time to make Kiddush, a bunch of people gather around the table. Some people grab those little cups of juice. The cantor grabs a big cup of juice. And then a few people at the other end of the table pour shots, right? They pour shots of, schnapps is the Yiddish phrase for it. They pour shots of hard alcohol, right? Or like whiskey or tequila or a cordial, Kahlua, something like that. Something celebratory, but not wine. And so for those people, as soon as everybody else is done with the B'rei Pri Hagafen, this crowd says, Shehakol niyeh bidvaro, and then they drink. And then that's serves the same purpose. It's just something that's not made out of grapes. You could do this with Dr. Pepper. If I've got any of my East Texas friends watching right now, you could do it with Big Red Soda Pop, which is good stuff too. So basically anything that's not wine that you're drinking, you would say Shehakol niyeh bidvaro at the end of that blessing, and you'd be fine. So let's see what else we have here. It seems people have serious health reasons for not drinking wine or grape juice. There are allergies, there are other things. Got Drake in from Alabama. Hey, Drake. I have allergic reaction to alcohol, so I'll try other options like grape juice. Again, there's nothing essential about alcohol that it has to be alcohol. It's just that wine for multiple millennia has been a symbol of joy in our lives. And what we're really talking about in that moment is joy, right? And we say it at special occasions, weddings, other holidays, because we're really referring to the joy there. Let's see. Just catching the end of this one, watching the replay. Milo's here. Kate is here. Larry, we have 2 candles, but normally my wife lights one and I light the other. Any problem with that? Not a darn thing, Larry. That's adorable. I'm not making fun either, man. You're bringing a tear to my eye. That's awesome. I think that's a great tradition. Thank you for bringing that up. Larry says Bevmo has kosher wines. If you have a Bevmo where you are, I highly recommend it. Okay to do Havdalah with water. That's the only thing I drink. I haven't looked at that before. I'm going to take a look at that and get back to you. I would say it might be better to do it with bread just because Havdalah is kind of a complement, the other side of the coin, sort of the Ezer Kenegdo of Kiddush. And so my thinking is that the same rules pertain, but I've never been asked that question before, so I have to look that up. Maybe I would use, if the only thing you drink is water, I would suggest maybe doing it with bread instead. So instead of saying a B'rei Pri Hagafen in the middle of Havdalah, you have like a little roll or something, or a pita or something like that, and include that in your Havdalah. Is there a reason why water was ruled out for Kiddush? I think it's because, and I don't know how the kids are using the word these days. I think it's because it's too basic, right? It is so basic to human life, right? You need water all the time. You could go theoretically a month without food, but only a couple of days without water. Water was the most common beverage there was. And I know I've heard stories about how in times where water safety wasn't good, people would drink wine and beer instead. But for the most part, wine was so common that it seemed, I guess, so intimately connected to mundane life that it seemed inappropriate for Shabbat. As I've taught in other contexts, part of Kavod Shabbat, or honoring the Sabbath, is to do things a little bit differently than you would normally do. Wear different clothes. They don't have to be, tuxedo or top hat and anything like that, but they should be different. We should talk differently on Shabbat. We should walk differently on Shabbat. And because water was so connected to the 6 days of the week, then we decided that for Kiddush, for purposes of sanctification, we should use something other than water. Again, if the only thing you drink is water, or the only thing you have is water, I would suggest doing Kiddush with bread. And in that place where it says, where you say the blessing Baruch, ending with Borei Pri Hagafen, I would say instead Baruch, ending with Hamotzi Lechem Min Haaretz. But you can't put out the Havdalah candle on bread. That's very good, Larry. There's a custom when people are putting out the Havdalah candle. You don't have to do this, but people do this. They put it in the cup of wine to put it out, and that might catch your bread on fire. So can't do bread either. We'll have to go back to the drawing board. Let me take a look at that and get back to you, Suzanne. I think this is an interesting question. If you can't do bread, try something else that is out of the ordinary. Presumably you can eat something. So I would take something that is as basic as bread. If you have like a gluten-free cracker, you can do that. I mean, it might be a different blessing. Like it's not, hamotzi is not necessarily on gluten-free products. But you can do, you can do it with something else. The idea is that if the only thing you have is water, choose food, right? And usually bread is around when you're making Kiddush like this. If carbs the issue with bread, there are keto and paleo options available. Yes, there's all sorts of carbs and gluten-free and things like that. The essential feature of bread is usually what it's made out of, like wheat or oats or spelt, and we get into that when we talk about Passover. Maybe tortillas, corn tortillas. I say, why the heck not? Let's see, what are the questions we have? Listen, I really appreciate people hanging with me through this one. This has been a little bit of a tough one. I'm going to have to work on my memory a little bit to see why I had a hard time with Friday night Kiddush. It's something I do every week and not accustomed to having it shut down like that. But this has been a great learning session, everybody. I hope this is helpful for your Shabbat. Whatever questions you continue to have, throw them in the chat, throw them in the comments below. Send them to me via Facebook Messenger or something like that. We talk about this stuff sometimes in the Jew Curious School. So that's a place where people get together in kind of a private, troll-free setting. It's not like a toll-free number, but a troll-free internet area where people exchange information, exchange support, and we learn a lot of stuff in live classes and recorded classes as well. And listen, I've made a lot of live videos lately. I'm kind of running out of ideas, so I need your help with this. If you could do me a favor, if there's something you've learned from me in the last couple of weeks that you want to know more about, that I could go deeper, or if there's a particular topic that you'd like me to do one of these live sessions on, do me a solid and put it in the comments below this video. I would be much obliged because I like to plan these out about a week at a time, so that if you could leave that in the comments below, that'll give me some ideas for what to do next week and the weeks after that. Just kind of a housekeeping announcement. I shared this with some of my students earlier. I'm going away for the weekend, so there will be no live feed tomorrow, never on Shabbat, but not on Sunday either. So Friday, Saturday, Sunday, you're off the hook. Go play hooky. Have a great time. I've had a gas learning with everybody for this last week, including this particular session. So with that, whatever questions you have remaining on this topic or any other topic that I've taught about or one that I haven't taught about, throw those in the comments below this video. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up. That helps other people on YouTube find it. And if you're not subscribed, I suggest subscribing to this channel. That way you'll get sort of instantly notified or at least have access to the listing of the other private videos, or excuse me, the other public live Facebook videos that I do. And once again, everybody, really appreciate learning with you today. And until next time, peace.